despite what he calls recessionary conditions in the housing market in this country, CIBC's Deputy Chief Economist says that it will hardly put a dent in the housing affordability crisis. This is in part due to population growth that continues to outpace forecasts. So why does the data available consistently miss the mark on population estimates, and what impact could that have in the long run? Let's bring in Benjamin Tal, Deputy Chief Economist at CIBC. Benjamin, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So you're looking at the data when it comes to forecasts here, and it's just, when you look back, it hadn't forecast where we're at this point. Can you put that into context for us?
Well, it's very confusing because, many people tend to blame municipalities for the shortage of housing. And clearly, there are many reasons and many people to blame why we are facing that shortage. But one of the issues is simply a disconnect between the forecast and real life. Just an example, it takes municipalities about a decade to prepare for new units, because it's very complicated, very long period. You have to get the land, you have to sell the land, you have to service the land, and then you have to sell it to developers. It takes a lot of time. So they need to know what to plan for. So if you look at the forecast 10 years ago, and they said, okay, what will be the population in 2023? 10 years ago, it was short 1.4 million people. That's a big number.
Yeah.
So those municipalities are planning for X, and you get X plus 1.4. That's a significant change in the plan that they didn't really forecast. So you cannot plan for something that is not in the plan. That's the point that I'm making. And therefore, one of the reasons why we have a housing crisis is because we have a planning crisis. And that's something that we have to fix.
And even in the most recent data that we got from the CMHC talking about the gap when it comes to housing specifically over these next few years, talking about the need for 3.5 million additional units by 2030, you think that is potentially out of date already, Benjamin?
Not potentially, it is up to.
It is.
Yes, it is, because the base population that they use was 700,000 lower than what's really happening because of the increase in non-permanent residents. So we have a situation in which this is a dynamic goal, a dynamic number. The 3.5 belonged to 2-3 years ago. The real number, if you update the actual numbers for 2022, 2023, is close to 5 million units that we are in shortage. So it's complicated. It's complicated. But one thing we know, we have to build a lot. We have to increase supply significantly. But at the minimum, we need plans that are consistent with reality. And therefore, we need a much more dynamic population growth forecast, not every 5 years.
So where do you think that needs to be done? Like, where could the fixes kind of happen so that we get that more up-to-date and more accurate data?
Yes, first of all, I'm not blaming Stats Canada or CMHC because they cannot plan for changes in policy. So it's really policy changes that impacted the flow of new immigrants and non-permanent residents. We know that out of the 1.4 gap, 1.3 were non-permanent residents. So we need to establish a system in which there is a target for non-permanent residents, so we know how many will be coming every year, so we can forecast it. If you remove the non-permanent residents from the story, the forecast is very accurate. So all the gap is non-permanent residents because there is no quota, there is no clear trajectory. We have to change it. We have to make sure that we know how many people are coming in the next 10 years.
Even when you think about the forecast, if it were to be 5 million homes that are needed to fill that gap at this point, Benjamin, it also, the reality that we've heard from so many people is that even building that number of homes, or the 3.5 million, would have been out of reach. So it's a challenging position to be in.
Absolutely. There is no way we are going to reach it anyway. But what I'm saying here is that for the future, one of the reasons why we created this gap is because of the fact that we didn't plan for it. Because we didn't know that the numbers will rise so quickly.
Yeah.
So for the next decade, let's get the numbers right.